Hello everyone, welcome to a new session of our device registration series. In our previous session, we have covered configuring hybrid Azure AD Join devices in managed domains and described the device registration detailed steps. Also, we have covered enabling auto hybrid Azure AD Join devices and we have registered a Windows 11 device to Azure Active Directory. In this session, I'll be walking you through the most common device registration issues and how to fix them. If you don't know me, my name is Muhammad Ismaili, and my goal is to make identity learning easier. So let's get started. The first issue we have is device doesn't have line of sight connection to domain controller. This could happen if there is network connectivity issues or restrictions, or if the device is not inside the corporate network and there is no VPN connectivity. So let's jump into our test device to see this error and to see how to fix it. This is our Windows 11 test device. Let's open PowerShell. And first of all, let's verify if this device connected to Azure Active Directory or not yet. To do that, we need to use DSRegTool/status command. Enter. As we can see here, the device is not connected to Azure Active Directory yet. As we mentioned before, we can trigger device registration using DSRegCMD/join command. And it's recommended to use debug switch because it's going to give us more information about what happened during device registration process. So now let's trigger device registration manually on this device by hitting enter. As we can see here, device registration didn't complete yet, and one of the most important prerequisites is not available, which is domain controller is available. This equals no. And also we can see the result code is 0x1, which means device registration didn't complete yet. And the error message says the device cannot be joined because a domain controller could not be located. We can also verify what happened during device registration using Event Viewer. So let's open Event Viewer, Application and Services Logs, Microsoft, Windows. Let's scroll down to User Device Registration, open Admin, and here we can see this information message, which means automatic device join pre-check task completed, but it says do not join. Why is that? Because domain controller is not available, and as we can see, this is the result code, which is 0x1, which means the device registration didn't complete successfully. Also, we can verify this using DSRegTool. So this is another way to verify the prerequisites for device registration and to troubleshoot device registration. So let's run this tool. Let's press 3 and press enter. Now, as we can see here, device registration tool failed in testing domain controller connectivity, and this also confirms device doesn't have connectivity to our local Active Directory. The recommended action is make sure the device has line of sight connection to the domain controller. I have created this firewall rule to block connectivity to local Active Directory. So let's disable this one and let's try to run device registration manually one more time. Hit enter. Device registration triggered, and as we can see here, domain controller is available. So this is how we fixed line of sight connection to local Active Directory issue. Our next issue is there is no internet connectivity under system context, which means device registration service is not able to communicate with Azure Active Directory device registration service under system context. So let's jump into our test device. From the previous device registration, we can see the device registration failed with discovery error, and we can see the error code is this one, the one that ends with 0021. This is very known discovery error, and this means device registration wasn't able to communicate with Azure Active Directory device registration services. If we went to Event Viewer and let's hit refresh, we can see this error clearly here, and we can see automatic device registration failed at join phase. So this is the error message or the error code that ends with 21, and the error phase is discover, which means we weren't able to discover our device registration endpoints. Let's minimize this one, and I'm going to start our device registration tool, which is another way that we can verify the device registration prerequisites. Let's go with option number 3 one more time and press enter. DSRegTool currently is going to verify internet connectivity under system context for Azure Active Directory device registration services. And as we can see here, system account is not able to communicate with device registration service endpoints. As we can see, it's failing right now to communicate with device.login.microsoft online, and also it failed in communicating with enterprise registration.windows.net. And here DSRegTool is going to give us some recommendation to fix the issue by ourselves. So it is recommended, if we are using a proxy, to allow system account to communicate with the mentioned 3 endpoints for device registration service in order to allow device registration to succeed. To repro this issue, I have went to Notepad and I have opened hosts file, which is located under C, Windows, System32, drivers, etc. So I'm going to open it right now, and I have created these 2 fake records to point device registration endpoints to a fake endpoint or a fake IP address. Right now, I'm going to delete this and I will save the hosts file. Let's close it. And currently, I'm going to trigger device registration tool one more time to verify what's going on. So let's go one more time with option number 3 and press enter. Again, device registration tool is going to verify device registration endpoints, and as we can see here, device was able to communicate with Microsoft endpoints under system context, which is what we are looking for currently. For now, I'm going to close this pop-up. We are going to see it in our later tests, but for now, as we can see, device registration was able to communicate with device registration service under system context. Now, let's go with the next issue. The next issue is service connection point is not configured correctly. This usually could happen if we configure device registration manually or using a PowerShell script. So let's jump into our test device. Now let's try to trigger device registration manually using our DSReg cmd/join command. Also, let's add debug switch. Enter. Now device registration triggered, but we can see here there is an error message says the tenant which has this domain not found. Also, we can test our tenant's information using this DSRegTool. So let's run DSRegTool one more time. Let's go with option number 3 as we usually do and press enter. Here, as we can see, DSRegTool grabbed service connection point information from local Active Directory, and after that, when it tried to test tenant name was not configured correctly. So we can verify service connection point under configuration partition by going to to our local Active Directory. Let's open run. And after typing adsiedit.msc, we need to press on enter or OK. Let's open our configuration partition, services, device registration configuration. This is our service connection point, as we mentioned before. Right click, properties, and let's go to keywords attribute. If we opened it, we can see our domain is smelylab.onmicrosoft.com, and it ends with number 1, which is of course not correct. So we have two ways to update the service connection point. We can update it manually. If we click on remove, we can just remove the number 1, and after that we click on add, okay, apply, okay. We can do it like this, or the recommended way is to use AD Connect Wizard. So let's do it using AD Connect Wizard. Click on Start and open AD Connect application. Click on Configure and choose Configure Device Options. Next. Here there is an overview about Hybrid Azure AD Join and Device Write Back. You may go through it. Then let's click Next. And here we need to sign in using a global admin account to fetch our tenants information from Azure AD. So let's sign in. Click on Next. Configure Hybrid Azure AD Join. Next. Windows 10 or later, domain join devices. Yes, and next. And here we need to choose our forest. Click on Add. Here we need to sign in using an enterprise admin account because it's going to update our configuration partition to update the service connection point. So let's sign in. Okay. Next. Click on Configure. And the configuration completed successfully, and our service connection point has been configured correctly. Let's exit this one, minimize our domain controller, and let's go with our DSRegTool one more time to verify our tenants information. Again, let's go with option number 3 and press enter. Here we can see our service connection point information, and we can see service connection point tenants information has been created successfully. And we close this one. We don't want this pop-up right now. If I scroll up, we can see test pass, tenant name is configured correctly, and also tenant ID is configured correctly. Now let's jump in to our next issue. This issue is one of the most common issues when it comes to device registration, where user certificate is not being populated correctly. So let's jump into our test device. Let's start by running our DSRegTool, and let's go with option number 3. As we can see here, test failed, and it says there is no user certificate under AD computer object. The recommended action is to make sure that you start the device registration process, and also the device has permissions to write self-signed certificate under local Active Directory computer object. Also, let's try to trigger device registration manually. So let's run dsreg cmd /join /debug command. Let's hit enter. And here we can see device registration didn't complete, and we have this error. Let's try to open our event viewer, refresh, and the last error that we see here is exit code access is denied, which means user certificate attribute was not populated, or the device registration service was not able to write the self-signed certificate under local Active Directory computer object. Now, let's jump in to our domain controller and let's open Active Directory users and computers. Here is our computer object. Let's right click on it, properties. Let's go to security tab. Usually we should see self user, which means self user is the computer object. This means the computer object itself has some permissions to be done on the computer object itself. Since it's missing from here, which is by default should be existing, we need to go to advanced. We clicked on advanced, we can see self doesn't exist here as well, and we can see enable inheritance button. Usually it should be disable inheritance, but it seems the administrator here performed some hardening, remove some permissions from the computer object. So usually to fix this, we need to restore the default permissions, or we can just easily add self account. This depends on what admins needs to be done on his environment. So let's go with the easiest option, which is let's enable the inheritance and also click on restore defaults, apply. Before we hit OK, let's go to effective access and select user. Let's choose self account and click on view effective access. If we scroll to the end, we can see self account has read permission on user certificate attribute, and also it has write permissions on user certificate attribute. So let's click OK. Okay. We can now close Active Directory users and computers, minimize our local Active Directory. Let's try to run device registration manually one more time. Here, device registration triggered, but we can see there is a join message or a join error, which means the device object by the given ID is not found in Azure Active Directory, but we don't have an access denied error anymore. Let's go back to our event viewer. Let's try to refresh it. And here we can see totally different error. We passed access denied error, and we can see the computer object does not exist in Azure Active Directory. Also, let's verify our device registration tool to see if device registration tool is going to verify user certificate attribute or not yet. Let's go with option number 3 one more time. Let's close this pop-up, and as we can see here, testing user certificate attribute under local Active Directory, we can find there is one certificate under user certificate attribute, and also this certificate is valid. If we went back to our local Active Directory, let's open Active Directory users and computers one more time. Here is our computer object, right click, properties. Let's go to attribute editor and let's go to user certificate attribute, and here we can see user certificate attribute populated successfully. That's it for this issue. Let's jump in to the next issue. Let's go now through device does not exist in Azure Active Directory issue. This could happen if device registration didn't trigger yet and the local Active Directory computer object doesn't have user certificate attribute populated, or if the first device registration triggered and device registration service created the self-signed certificate, pushed it under local Active Directory computer object, but AD Connect didn't sync this computer to Azure Active Directory yet. Let's go to our lab and verify this. Let's verify if the device is available in Azure Active Directory or not. We can do this by going to portal.azure.com, devices section, and we can type the device name and let's try to refresh. As we can see here, the computer object does not exist in Azure Active Directory yet. From our previous test, when we run DSRegTool, we were able to see user certificate attribute already populated, as we can see here, and the computer object has one certificate, but the computer object is not synchronized to Azure Active Directory. Also, if we open our local Active Directory, this is our computer object, we can see there is a certificate under user certificate attribute. So this means device registration triggered for the first time, it created the self-signed certificate, pushed it under local Active Directory computer object under user certificate attribute. But AD Connect didn't trigger its synchronization cycle yet. So right now, let's try to trigger AD Connect sync cycle by opening PowerShell, start AD sync cycle command, and let's open AD Connect synchronization service. Here we can see the export is in progress. Let's wait it some time till it finish. And here we can see there is an object has been added by AD Connect. If we open that object, double click on it, we can see this is our computer object. So the display name is Windows 11. So this is our computer object, which was synchronized using AD Connect. We can close this one. Let's go back to our Azure portal, hit refresh, and here we can see the computer object already synchronized to Azure Active Directory, but the computer still in pending state, which means we still need the second device registration to trigger in order to complete device registration successfully. Let's jump into our next issue. One of the most common device registration issues is having Azure Active Directory device objects appear in Azure Active Directory in pending state, which means they are not fully registered yet. This could happen in two scenarios. The first one, if the first device registration triggered successfully on the device and device registration service created the self-signed certificate, pushed it under local Active Directory computer object, and AD Connect synchronized this computer to Azure Active Directory, but the second device registration has not triggered yet. Or the second scenario, if admins deleted the computer objects from Azure Active Directory by either removing local Active Directory computer object out of the sync scope and return them back, or by removing Azure Active Directory device objects from Azure Active Directory from portal or using PowerShell script. Let's jump into our demo to verify both scenarios and to see how to fix them. Here we can see our device is in pending state. So let's verify if we are falling in the first scenario or the second scenario. The easiest way is to use DSRegTool. So let's go to our PowerShell and let's run DSRegTool one more time. And let's go with option number 5 to verify the health status for the device. Also, we can use option number 3, which is troubleshooting Hybrid Azure AD Join. And if we chosen that option and the device was already registered, the tool is going to verify the health status for the device automatically. But if the device is not registered, it's going to verify the prerequisite. Now, let's go with option number 5 and hit enter. Here, we can see the device is not connected to Azure Active Directory yet. So, also, we can see the device is in pending state. So here we speak about the first scenario where the first device registration triggered successfully, device registration service on the device created self-signed certificate and pushed it under local Active Directory computer object, and AD Connect already synchronized this computer to Azure AD, and currently the device object waits the second device registration to trigger to complete the device registration. And as we mentioned before, device registration is going to trigger once the user signs into the device, or by default every single hour, this is hard coded, or by running DSRegCMD/join command. So right now, let's try to join this device or to connect it to Azure Active Directory manually. Let's run DSRegCMD/join. And as we mentioned before, it's recommended to use debug switch. Now device registration triggered. And device registration completed successfully. As we can see, the device is already Azure AD Joined. So currently, let's go back to our Azure portal, refresh. Let's wait it some time. Now we can see the device has been registered successfully because we have date and time got populated under registered attribute. Now let's go back to our device registration tool. And in this case, we need to run option number 5 to verify the health status for the device one more time. So let's hit enter. Now the tool is going to verify the device state. This is from the device itself, and also it's going to ask us to sign into Azure Active Directory to verify the computer object in Azure Active Directory. So the tool uses device code, and this is the device code that we should add or enter to sign in. Currently, by default, the tool copies this device code into the clipboard. So all we need is just to paste it using Ctrl V and click Next. Here we need to sign in using any normal account, because by default, any normal account has read permissions on Azure Active Directory devices. So let's sign in. Let's hit continue and then close this window. Now, as we can see, the computer object does exist in Azure Active Directory. It is enabled also in Azure Active Directory. And the most important thing is it's not in pending state currently. And for sure, this device is not stale and it's not dual state. So this device currently is in health state, which means device registration completed successfully and the end users are good to go with this device. So whenever the user signs into this device, is going or she's going to have the primary refresh token to have single sign-on experience to cloud services. Now, let's try to go with the second scenario where the device may be in pending state in Azure Active Directory because the admin removed this computer from Azure Active Directory. So let's go back to our Azure Active Directory and let's try to remove this computer from Azure portal. So let's refresh. This is our computer object. Currently, we cannot delete it because we signed into the device using a normal account. So this normal account won't allow us to remove the computer object or to manage the computer, right? So currently we need to sign out from this normal account. And let's sign in using the admin one. Let's go to Azure Active Directory, Devices, All Devices section, and let's try to search for our Windows 11 device. Hit refresh. So this is our Windows device. It's already registered, as we know. Now let's delete this computer object. Currently, the computer object already deleted, or device object deleted from Azure Active Directory. May need some time to get this reflected to our port. Let's just wait it. So now the device object has been removed from our portal. Now, let's go back to our AD Connect server, and in this time, we need to trigger synchronization manually. By default, as we mentioned before, AD Connect sync cycle is 30 minutes, right? So right now, for demo purposes, we need to run it manually. Let's go to synchronization service. Export is in progress. Our export completed successfully, and we can see there is an object has been added. We open that object, we can see it's our device. Close this one, close synchronization service, and let's go back to our Azure portal. Let's try to refresh. And we have our device came back to Azure Active Directory, but it's in pending state, right? So although the device is already registered, we can see it's in pending state. So let's go with DSRegCMD /status command. Currently, we can see the computer object is already connected to Azure Active Directory. It's in hybrid state. However, in Azure Active Directory, we can see it's in pending, right? So here, users will have an issue if they try to sign into this computer object and they won't be able to get that primary refresh token, which is responsible for PRT. And also, they won't be able to pass device-based conditional access policies because they don't have the primary refresh token. Now, to verify this scenario, we can just easily go with DSRegTool, and let's go with option number 5, because currently we need to troubleshoot or to verify if our device is in healthy state or not. This is the first thing that IT help desk or IT admins should do when users complain about accessing Azure Active Directory resources from their devices. So let's verify the health status for this device by going with option number 5. And as we can see here, the tool verifies the pending state, and it says the device currently is in pending state in Azure Active Directory. And the recommendation is to run DSRegCMD leave and run join command as well. And we need to run DSRegCMD /leave command to clear the device state from the device itself. Because currently, every single time user signs into the device or every an hour, if device registration triggers, the device registration service will see the device already registered. So the whole device registration process is going to be aborted, right? So the fix for pending state is to run DSRegCMD /leave command, and let's go with debug switch. Enter. Currently, the computer object has been removed from Azure Active Directory. Okay. If we went back to our Azure portal, let's try to refresh. Because when we run leave command, device registration service is going to remove the computer object from Azure AD as a best effort. So right now, we need to verify if this computer object removed from Azure Active Directory or not. Let's hit refresh. And here we can see the computer object already removed from Azure AD. So currently, we need to wait AD Connect to sync the computer to Azure Active Directory before we run DSRegCMD /join command. We can do this by going back to our AD Connect server. Let's hit enter to trigger sync service. Let's go back to synchronization service. The export is still in progress. Okay, export completed successfully. And let's minimize our domain controller and AD Connect server, the same one. Refresh. Okay, the device came back to Azure Active Directory. Now let's go to our PowerShell and let's run DSRegTool /join /debug. And here we can see the device connected to Azure Active Directory again, and it is right now Hybrid Azure AD Join. Go back to our Azure portal and let's hit refresh. And the device registered successfully. We can also confirm the device health status and the device already registered using DSRegTool, option number 5 one more time. And currently we can see the tool says the device is already connected to Azure Active Directory as Hybrid Azure AD Join and it is in health state. So right now users should be able to have primary refresh token when they sign into the device. Let's jump in to our next issue. Last issue we have in our video is device is not in health state. This could happen if the device itself is registered, but it's not in good state in Azure Active Directory, whether because it has been deleted or removed, or it has been disabled by administrator, or if it is in pending state. So in these scenarios, users won't be able to have primary refresh token, which is needed for single sign-on. So let's jump into our demo and see this. In our device here, we can see it's already registered. So from our previous DSRegTool, we can see the device is already Hybrid Azure AD Join and is in health state. So let's try to go to Azure portal and select this device and let's try to disable it. So currently this device is disabled, and if the user tries to sign into this device, he or she won't be able to acquire primary refresh token, which is needed, as we mentioned, for single sign-on. Now, to verify the device's health state, the easiest way also to use our DSRegTool. So let's run the tool and go with option number 5. Basically, the tool is going to verify the computer object, the device itself. It will verify if it is already registered or connected to Azure Active Directory or not yet. Also, it's going to verify if the device exists in Azure Active Directory and if it is enabled. As we can see here, the tool says the device is not enabled in Azure Active Directory. So we need to re-enable it in order to make it in good state or in health state. Let's go back to our Azure portal and let's try to enable this computer object. Let's go back to the DSRegTool, run it one more time, go with option number 5 again. And here we can see the tool confirms the device exists in Azure AD, enabled, not in pending state, and not in dual state as well. And for enabling and disabling Hybrid Azure AD Join devices, this could be done from local Active Directory because those devices are already synchronized from local AD to Azure AD, which means if the administrator disables this computer on premises, this is going to be reflected in Azure Active Directory using AD Connect in its next synchronization cycle. Thank you so much for watching this video where we covered multiple device registration issues and how to fix them. See you in our next one.